All right, so today I have the pleasure of being joined by Shawn Kiernan. He is the host of the SK Sports Podcast Show. He's from New York, a fellow podcaster like myself. He is a big New York Giants fan. That's something we have in common. Shawn has been doing a lot of in-depth, insightful reaction videos on Instagram whenever there's a big trade in the NFL, MLB, NBA, every sport, NHL included as well. Anytime there's a big move, a big game, Shawn's always giving now since probably 2022. You interviewed David Wilson on your podcast back then, and then obviously now since then I've been following your page and staying in touch. So thank you so much for your time, my friend. A pleasure having you on as a guest. How you doing today?
Hey, Joey, I appreciate you having me on. I love all the work you do on your show and everything. Keep doing your thing. It's an honor to be a part of your podcast. Can't wait to talk some football.
Yeah, yes, it's gonna be great, dude. I'm psyched. So thank you for taking the time. And as I said, you're a fellow podcaster yourself, and you've had David Wilson, former Giants first round pick, on your podcast. Kyle Banks as well, Giants Hall of
Yeah.
Famer, on your podcast. So you're very obviously very much in tune with the whole sports world and in doing podcasting. So having you on today, having your expertise is truly a pleasure and an honor. So thank you. We'll start out with the NFL. As I said, we'll talk about the Giants, get to the NFL draft, and maybe talk some Mets and Yankees at the end. Let's start out with the Dexter Lawrence trade. The Giants made a big move this past weekend, trading Dexter Lawrence to the Cincinnati Bengals for the 10th overall pick. What were your immediate reactions to that trade, and what are your thoughts now heading into the draft with the Giants having two top 10 picks?
So with the whole thing with Lawrence, it was a bit of a head scratcher for me because when he officially requested that trade, I was trying to figure things out. I'm like, okay, why was he wanting to request this trade in the first place? Then I was figuring things out with Joe Schoen and his camp. They were going back and forth for some time now, and they were really struggling to reach out a longer term deal. And I think he wanted something for the future more like at a higher value, like in the Chris Jones of Kansas City type market. I thought that's something that he was trying to eye. So then when it got to a point where he just didn't want to be here anymore, as much as it sucks to lose him as a pass rusher, because he's a major anchor to that Giants defensive line, and you don't want to really lose that kind of talent. But when he wants out, you got to look for an alternative, try to find a trade partner. And that's when things at first I thought was going to get difficult.
Yeah, and when you look at the return we get, right? Like you said, you obviously want to keep them. You don't want to lose them, especially you don't want to lose them for a small package, right? If you're getting a third round pick, second round pick, it's not worth that. But with the return we got, the 10th overall pick, do you think that's the best offer we were going to get for him?
Yes, what it came down to pretty much, I believe, is that when they were looking for another team, I think Cleveland was a reported team that went out and offered a second round pick. And so that was kind of like, that seemed like the floor for a second. And then all of a sudden, Cincinnati, that is in clear contention mode for a Super Bowl, investing highly in their offense, all those star players they have. Now it's time to kind of reshape that defense. So Cincinnati's like, we have an offer that you won't be able to refuse here, where nobody else in the league is going to top this one. For you to have the opportunity to have two top 10 selections in the first round, there's no way you're saying no. And then the Giants, it seems like they ran to the league office and said, heck yes, we're doing this trade.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly how it went. When they get off that high of a pick, it's tough to pass up, especially with where the Giants are at right now. And now you look at the draft. How do you think the Giants are going to attack having the fifth pick and the 10th pick? You could go both defense picks. You could mix it up, go offense, defense. You could go in a lot of directions here if you're the Giants. Even maybe look at your guy, Jeremiyah Love, right? Notre Dame running back, potentially. We'll see if we make that, decision again, taking running back in the top five. But what are your thoughts on how the Giants are going to attack this draft?
It may not be the most attractive route for the Giants to go, but because a lot of people want that explosive, being in the market that the Giants are in, you want all those explosive players on the offense, you want points scored, all these touchdowns happening, all that surrounding dart. But what the major address that needs to be made on the roster is the defense. You need a home run type selection in Caleb Downs. And if you could somehow get another player like Sonny Styles or even Mansour Deline, a defensive back from LSU, that would be huge because that secondary needs some work. But Caleb Downs, the safety, he's very versatile. So he's more than just a major help in the secondary. He could do a lot more involved in the game too.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's definitely something we could use, right? An anchor on the defense, a very good tackler as well. We obviously struggled the past couple of years with missed tackles. And the Giants defense, now you lose Dexter Lawrence. They're missing pieces, right? When you lose Dexter
Yeah.
Lawrence, now you have to fill that void. What are your thoughts on how the Giants are going to try to fill that void without him? Obviously, getting Downs and Styles would be great for that defense. Now they can obviously fix, the defensive line as well when you lose Dexter Lawrence and his potential. I know he had a down year last year, was struggling a little bit, and there were questions about his effort and Carl Banks being one person that questioned it. How do you think the Giants are going to address that defensive line void now without Dexter Lawrence there?
I'm going to be saying pretty much what a lot of other people are saying when it comes to replace. You can't replace Dexter Lawrence talent level, but what you can do is pretty much add a bunch of depth and kind of just develop some of these young guys that you have in your room already. Also add a few veterans, draft somebody at some point in the second, fourth round, whatever situation they can do that in. But, I want to see the second round pick from last year, Darius Alexander, guy from Toledo, step up, have more of a major impactful role in their defense. So that's someone to keep an eye out on. Even the guy, I think, from a couple of years ago, undrafted free agent from SMU, Chapman. I would like to see him be somewhat of a factor in their defense too, and try to have a major spot on the team if he can.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you. I think Chapman's a guy to definitely keep your eye on. He's a guy that we saw the last couple of years in limited opportunities, but we saw him hustling, making plays downfield. Even when there was a couple big explosive runs, he was hustling down the field, giving it his all, which I love that effort, especially on a team where we were down in some games. Our run defense was very poor the last season. Last 2 years hasn't been great, but last year was historically bad for the Giants as a run defense. It's important to try to fill that void now. And like you said, you're not going to get Dexter Lawrence back in return, probably, right? Like that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you trade a superstar talent, but the goal is obviously to try to address it to the best of their ability. One guy that I saw that the Giants could be interested in, and maybe the second round, is Peter Woods out of Clemson. What are your thoughts on him maybe being a guy the Giants look at the early part of the second round?
Actually, for Peter Woods, I don't know too much about him exactly. I know, coming from a big program like Clemson, they're obviously known for their defensive linemen. You've seen that's where Dexter Lawrence came from.
Mm-hmm.
So they produce quality talent on that defensive lines. I don't really know too much about him, but I think there's other prospects as well with Woods too. You think of Lee Hunter, you think of Caden McDonald from Ohio State, guys like that too. I think all three players will definitely be in the mix for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Especially with the draft picks we got now, right? You got 5 and 10, so you can address what you need to there, and then having that second round pick as well is definitely great for this Giants team. And Joe Schoen will be busy, and obviously he was busy this past weekend. The Giants had Odell Beckham Jr. back in the building for a workout this past weekend, which is great. That was the day after maybe we sent Joe Schoen to go visit Arizona State and see Jordan Tyson in person, which is cool. And then the following day, obviously, had Odell, or maybe a day or two later, had Odell in for a workout. What are your thoughts on Odell potentially coming back and having a reunion in New York with the Giants?
Oh, I think he would just put the fan base, everyone would lose their minds to have him back in a good way. I think that's the kind of excitement you want to talk about, all the flashiness that people want to add on the offense in the draft. Why not bring back Odell? That would kind of increase that volume in terms of excitement and what he brings to the table. At least that can bring a different approach to the offense too, because then you just get a whole nother entire scheme. So it would be really interesting to see how he would fit in exactly, because they have a couple of younger receivers too that they added via free agency. So I would be intrigued to see how he fits in exactly. But why not? It doesn't hurt you. You can never have enough receivers.
Especially the injuries we've had the last couple of years, right? Malik Neighbors went down. Wan'Dale Robinson was really the only guy last year that was pretty consistent at the wide receiver position. There's some flashes here and there from some other guys, on the offense. But no one is as consistent as Wan'Dale was. Slayton's had his moments over time, but obviously hasn't been, what we were hoping Slayton would be. I still like Slayton a lot, and I'm happy he is a Giant, but he hasn't had, the biggest stretch of consistency, unfortunately. He's had some
Right.
drops over the years, so it wouldn't hurt to add a receiver, and I'm with you on that. And like you mentioned, we've made some free agency additions, one being Donnell Mooney. Of the guys we've brought in, so Tremaine Edmonds, Donnell Mooney, Isaiah Likely as well. Which one of those additions, and anyone else I didn't mention, are you most excited to see in a Giants uniform?
Ooh, that's a great question. It's a tough question too, because I love Edmonds. I think the most exciting signing for me is Isaiah Likely, just because now we had this discussion before where he's going to have that full opportunity now to blossom as a route runner, as a pass catcher in this offense. He didn't really have much of that in Baltimore with, Mark Andrews. So having him to kind of like take off in his career and have that next step, and the Giants are going to expect a lot from him in the passing game now. He's going to be, because with Neighbors, who knows when he comes back. So in the passing attack, he's most likely going to be their number one threat.
Mhm.
So we'll see where that goes.
I like that pick though, being the guy that you're most excited to see because likely, like you said, has a lot of potential. And I think we saw flashes of that in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. And then we saw some times when Andrews was there and they had some other receivers as well. Zay Flowers, a BC guy, which I'm repping BC right now.
Yeah.
Being a guy that takes away some of those looks from Isaiah Likely, he's gonna have a big, focus on this offense is going to be getting Isaiah Likely the ball, especially in space. He's got good hands, can move. That's going to help this offense out. Another guy you said, Tremaine Edmonds, is going to help that defense, especially a defense with all the missed tackles we've had and the issues in the run game. He's going to be great. I'm excited to see him. And then I think the most underrated addition is Donald Mooney. I think Mooney's going to be a guy that can stretch the field, make a play over the top, which the Giants could use on this team right now. And when Malik Neighbors gets back, you don't want to place too much pressure on him day one. It's going to help to have some other guys who can get open and create space. I think Mooney could do that for the Giants. Are you excited to see Mooney in a Giants uniform?
Oh yeah, for sure. And we've seen so many flashes from him, even in Atlanta too. Last year it wasn't the best season for him overall in terms of production and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, he had some flashes when his name was called. So like you just never know with a player like that who's pretty motivated and wants to take that next step in his career. That's why I'm intrigued by Mooney and even Calvin Austin too, just because of guys that are going to be out there that have something to prove. And that's like kind of the most interesting kind of players for me.
Yeah. Calvin Austin's a great one. I forgot about him, but he's a great addition. Another guy that can make some plays over the top, stretch the field, which we saw him do that a little bit with Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh. Could definitely play. And I think that's going to obviously help Jackson Dart is guys that can create some space since that was something we've been missing, I feel like, the last couple seasons, and especially in Jackson Dart's rookie year this past year. What are your thoughts on Jackson Dart? Do you think he is the future of the New York Giants, the franchise quarterback?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he is for especially a player right now at his level, he's good. He fits the market. He brings that leadership for a young player. I think he is a really good quality trait as a leader too. Last year, did he do a little bit too much, when it comes to trying to be that aggressive runner, trying to make too much happen? Yes, he did at a bunch of times. But I think the more maturity as a player he gets, and with this coaching staff, the new coaching staff with Harbaugh, that's important because now I don't think that's going to be as much of a problem as it was in his rookie year. So that's just something to keep an eye out on.
Yeah, he definitely tried to do a little too much at times, and that's kind of the importance of being a rookie quarterback is learning those mistakes, right? And you're getting in there, getting reps, real live reps, right against NFL talent, and you're going to make mistakes. That's just part of the game. You learn from it. Like you said, now you have John Harbaugh, a coach that is obviously very well established, very well respected, knows the game, had a lot of winning seasons there in Baltimore, obviously, which
Yeah.
had a lot of losing seasons recently, unfortunately, for our Giants. But you're bringing a guy that's a steady head coach. And what were your thoughts on bringing in Harbaugh? Was that the guy you wanted, and were you happy with the hire?
Yeah, when it first the news first broke, I was shocked that he actually was going to be made available because the coaching market was interesting because it was Stefanski, I think, was out on the market at the time. Tomlin, I was like, when I heard about Tomlin rumors, I was like, okay, maybe Mike Tomlin would want a different environment. Maybe he'll want to get back into coaching. I'll go on in for Tomlin. But then once I saw John Harbaugh come out, I was just like, okay, I think the Giants need to go all in on this guy, and it ended up being that was the hire there.
Yeah, and it was a great hire, right? A guy that's a
Yeah.
big name, which the Giants could have went in a lot of directions there. There were a lot of guys available, Mike McDaniel being one. And after the Giants fired Brian Daboll, we fired him, mid-season, so we had time to kind of figure out who we'd try to hire that was a coordinator elsewhere, or also you could wait it out and see who's fired, on Black Monday, essentially after the NFL season ends, and you could see who's available. And I guess when the Giants saw John Harbaugh's name be available, that was probably their number one option. And they made the decision to keep Joe Schoen. We've seen them do that in years with Jerry Reese, Dave Gettleman. We've seen them keep the GM and fire a head coach. What are your thoughts on that? The Giants' decision to obviously fire Brian Daboll midseason not bring back their interim head coach and Mike Kafka, and then make the decision to keep Joe Schoen, who ends up being part of the hiring process of John Harbaugh. Were you happy with that decision to bring back Joe Schoen, or were you contemplating them, moving on from him?
Yeah, I was thinking, I was leaning towards moving on from Shane because from what has he proved to you where you're like, okay, he could lead this head coaching search due just to the track record. When you bring in a guy that he was familiar with over in Buffalo with Dable and everything, that didn't pan out, you would think that, okay, the GM should go too. He's just as much, he's responsible as much as Dable is too. So usually that's the case in most teams. They usually lose the GM and the head coach most cases. But now they just, for whatever reason, ownership was just like, we don't want to go through that whole entire process of bringing in a head coach and a GM on top of that. So whoever else was in that front office, it might have been the assistant guy, Brown, who maybe was helping out Shane too with that selection and trying to figure out Harbaugh and everything like that. So maybe that's the point. And obviously he may be on certain restrictions in his role in the front office. So we'll see exactly what his role is moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. They were saying, I was reading reports from people in the past we hired John Harbaugh, that Harbaugh is going to have a say in a lot of things, and it's not just going to be free reign for the GM Joe Schoen. He's going to have to obviously respond to what Harbaugh wants, which a GM and a head coach always are going to have constant communication, but usually the head coach does report to the GM. Now Harbaugh is going above that, and he's going straight to, if I remember correctly, John Mara, the president, so in the owner of the New York Giants. So it'll be interesting to see how things work out here for the Giants with Harbaugh. I'm psyched with getting him, and obviously now with a new era beginning here for the Giants, there's a lot of question marks about what we'll be as a team next year. This past year, we had a tough schedule. This next year, it won't be necessarily easy, but might be a little bit easier than this past season was. What are your expectations for the Giants heading into year one of the John Harbaugh era?
Just any sort of competition in terms of just getting once you get the roster after the draft put together and everything, whichever free agent signings you make after the draft, you get into training camp. That's the best feeling ever too, to have with this veteran coach and his accomplishments already. And I just think the expectation is just that you want to kind of bring this identity. Just we're going to be in each and every game we play in. We're not going to be, you can't just walk all over us. On both sides of the ball, you just kind of want to be physical and present in every game and every play as much as you can.
Absolutely. I'm with you. You want to bring back that hard-nosed Giants football, right? The football we grew up watching.
Yeah.
We saw the Giants win two Super Bowls, right, over the course of our lifetime. And those teams are built through grit, toughness, resiliency. And I want to see that from this Giants team because last year, it felt like there were times we got down in games, guys gave up. There was questionable effort from guys at times. Obviously, we saw Kyle Banks call out Dexter Lawrence with, the poor run defense we had as a team last year. I think John Harbaugh brings a different sort of mentality, right, where his teams are always competitive in Baltimore. They always had a competitive roster. They always spent and had good talent. But I do think at the same time, coaching is important and making adjustments in the game is important. And I know there were times in Baltimore he's blown some leads. That happens as a head coach, especially when you're there 18 years like he was in Baltimore. You're going to have some bad losses over the course of that stretch. But the Giants over the last few years just never found their footing, right? We never had consistent wins and consistent competitive games. And hopefully that's different now with this new era. And like you said, it's going to be a building block. Just see some improvement this year, and then maybe that following year is when we take that real step up. There are some questions still heading in to the draft. The Giants obviously trade Dexter Lawrence. There are still questions of whether or not they're going to trade Kayvon Thibodeaux. What are your thoughts on Kayvon Thibodeaux, and would you want the Giants to hold on to him or trade him?
I think when you move on from Lawrence like that, you would think it opens the door to move on from Kayvon as well, just because of his contract. I think it's after this year, his contract's up. So if there's a possibility and you know already that you're not going to be able to reach a long-term deal with him, why not try to get a third-round pick and a draft pick that they don't have in this draft? So, like, if you were to another talent, if you lose that on the defense, it's going to be tough. But could you move up in the draft with that third round pick that you trade, that you acquired to trade Kayvon? So you never know. Things like that, it's funky like that. So maybe you can trade Kayvon still, move up in the draft, acquire a player at a position of need, and that would be kind of huge in a way because you just don't want to see another player walk for absolutely nothing. Joe Shane's been kind of notable for that in years past with Saquon Barkley, Xavier McKinney. There's a couple more players that's just not coming to my head right now. Julian Love, that comes to my head. But yeah, but there's been players that he just let walk out the door. Great talent and just nothing. You could have got draft picks for him at least, and you knew for a fact you weren't going to be able to reach a long-term extension. So that's why I'm really happy with the Dexter Lawrence trade, and they should visit that with Kayvon if possible.
Yeah, that was excellent insight. You're right. We did let guys walk in the past, and sometimes you gamble on yourself and you say, okay, we'll finish out the season, see if we can get them back on a new contract. There are times you know you're not going to probably re-sign them. If the Giants weren't willing to pay Dexter Lawrence what he wanted to, which he just got that extension 1 year added on at $28 million with Cincinnati. If they knew they weren't going to pay him, it made sense to trade Dexter Lawrence. If they know they're probably not going to pay Kayvon, especially if they didn't pay Dexter, they're probably not going to pay Kayvon in free agency next year. It would make sense to maybe move him. And if you get a third round pick, fourth round pick, even that's a starter on this team right now with where we stand. I don't mind that at all. It made sense with Cincinnati. There are teams that are looking to add pass rushing, add help to the defensive line. A team like Cincinnati, maybe they add on another trade and they call the Giants and say we want Kayvon, which they were interested last year at one point of the deadline, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
They were interested in Kayvon. So maybe they would make that deal. And that deal for Dexter, which going back now to the beginning, we were talking about Dexter Lawrence's trade to Cincinnati. That's a good move there for Cincinnati. And I know you said that on your Instagram. You were mentioning the fact that they needed help on that defense, and they've been adding guys, right? They added Cook in free agency. They added Jonathan Allen, if I remember correctly, in free agency.
Yeah.
So they've made some moves. What were your thoughts on that move for the Bengals adding Dexter Lawrence? What do you think their thought process was in getting him there in that deal?
They just needed someone that was very impactful. They just needed something that would take them to the next level just to show, that their defense is kind of be formidable now. And it is because you added Boye Mafe too. And they're, that defense is a lot better than what it used to be. That's for sure. And I'm really interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, myself as well. I think when you look at that team too, the Bengals, for years have kind of neglected giving long-term contracts, which have seen them be kind of reluctant to do so. So getting Dexter Lawrence with 2 years left on his deal and then adding a third year seems like an ideal situation for them. And they've been struggling at drafting players the last few years. They've missed on some guys in the last 5 years or so. They've hit on some guys, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. Amarius Mims has a lot of potential. They've also missed on some guys the last 5 years as well. So we'll see how things go. I do think it made sense for them to make this trade. I think it could be a win-win both ways. It seems like you see it that same way as well. And for the Giants, adding another pick here to the first round, it makes things that much more exciting and that much more fun for the Giants on Thursday night. So that now will lead me to talking about the NFL draft. And I'd love to hear some thoughts of yours on your mock draft. I know you just put out your final mock draft on your Instagram today, which for everybody listening, go check it out on Instagram, Shawn_Kiernan, Kiernan. SHAWN_Kiernan. Definitely go check that out. Has a lot of great insight, which he'll put out, as I said, reaction videos to trades, big games, preview seasons in the MLB, NFL. Shawn does great work. Go and check out his Instagram page. As I mentioned, today you did put out your final mock draft. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You don't have to break it down completely if you don't like. You could just talk about some players and picks of where you have guys going. I'd love to hear some of your insight on why you had guys going where they were going.
So the draft kind of for me really starts at pick 3, just because Vegas obviously they need a franchise game changer at the quarterback position. They've been new head coach and everything. They're going to be ties with. They've been locked in on Mendoza for a long time. The Jets. I feel like there's been multiple smoke screens about them trying to target maybe David Bailey, stuff like that. I think they've been sold and committed on Arvell Reese for a while. So that the third pick with Arizona, that's the team that's always the wild card in the draft for me, because a team that's in full rebuild mode, trying to figure out what position they're going to address first. Is it going to be, for instance, Mauioa, the offensive lineman from Miami? They need a lot of help there. Is it going to be somebody like a running back, which wouldn't really make sense to them, for them, I should say. But would they select Jeremiyah Love just to spite a team like Tennessee, who's really interested in him? That's Arizona's always that wild card team for me, where it's just like you just never know what they're gonna do. And then also the wide receivers in this draft, I'm really intrigued by them. Who's gonna be that number one guy first? Is it gonna be Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson, Cornell Tate? We don't know exactly who's going to be that first receiver off, but I think this is a pretty deep group, and I'm curious to see what you have to say about them.
Yeah, I think the wide receiver group is going to be fun to watch, see where guys end up. And I think you and I over DMs, we were chatting about Mekhi Lemon in the past. I think he's the best receiver in this draft. I know a lot of people will look at Connell Tate. A lot of people now recently, Tyson's getting a lot more hype for obviously his size, his ability to get open, his explosiveness, great athleticism. I think Mekhi Lemon, his big playability is something that was getting talked about a lot, especially at the combine. Now, the last month or so, I feel like some of those other guys, especially Tyson's getting more of the hype. I think Mekhi Lemon is the best receiver in this draft. With that being said, you might not be able to go wrong with any of these guys. No one knows how guys will pan out, but right now, all three players have a lot of potential, and I could see any of those three guys going one, two, or three in order, at the wide receiver position. As for what you mentioned with the Cardinals, I could definitely see them taking Jeremiyah Love. Could also see them maybe even adding an edge rusher if, obviously Reese will probably go number two. Could be Bailey, could be Ruben Bain. They could go in multiple directions, which that's the thing. Like you said, that's probably where the draft begins. I think Alvaro Reese does go number two to the Jets. And then after that, number three, that's the wild card. Of those wide receivers that we mentioned, and maybe there's another guy as well you're a fan of, which one do you think is the best? Which one would you prefer? If the Giants were taking one of these guys, which first round receiver would you want the Giants to go and get?
For me, it definitely would be Mekhi Lemon. A lot of people were like, we always talk about wide receiver U being LSU, Ohio State. We throw those universities in, plenty of talent and everything. But the up and coming wide receiver team overall program is USC. Their talent that they've been producing, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane's in this draft. They've also had, I'm missing a couple of players, Michael
Drake
Pittman.
London, Michael
Yeah,
Pittman,
London.
Drake London, Juju Smith-Schuster in the past.
Yeah, Jordan Addison. There's a lot of talent there. USC's definitely in that mix there. So Mekhi Lemon, a lot of traits of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He had a really effective year, obviously, for the Trojans last year and what they were able to do there. But yeah, he would be my number one clear-cut wide receiver if I were the Giants, if I was interested, or really anybody. I think he would fit well with Kansas City. I could see something about the Chiefs with Mahomes and him possibly working together. I don't know why I see that, but it's just a fit for some reason.
Yeah, he's a guy that gets open too, which Mahomes needs that, right? They've taken chances on some receivers in recent years, and they got some good players. And Tyquan Thornton was a guy that was a bust for the Patriots essentially. And then he goes to the Chiefs and ends up being a good player for them. A lot of guys look good in that Chiefs offense. If you add a guy with the talent level of Mekhi Lemon to that offense, it would be special. And I think they could go and do that and draft him. And I'm looking at your mock here. So you have the Giants taking Downs at 5, Mansour Delane at 10. So what are your thoughts on the Giants going two guys in the secondary? Obviously, two top 10 picks, so they could go in a variety of directions. But how important is it for the Giants to address the secondary here in the top 10 with one of the picks at least?
Yeah, so I think you kind of want to send the message that in the offseason, they really invested on that offensive side. So I would like to see losing Dexter Lawrence. Now it's time. Let's invest in defense. And you got the opportunity with two top 10 selections. Go out and get yourself guys that are impactful, immediate pros. Like that's what I see in Caleb Downs, a guy who's just like a really good leader as a young player and a guy who's like one of the most pro-ready guys too. So that's what makes it interesting for him. And even Mansour Deline, bringing him in, the number one corner in this draft, I believe. So going out to get those talents would just make a huge impact for that secondary right away.
And that's an area of need for the Giants, right? Is secondary. We've lost some guys the last couple of years. Cordell Flott left obviously in free agency. Wide receiver, like I already mentioned, is somewhat of a need as well. So they could go at 10 there. If Mekhi Lemon falls, could go there. That's the nice thing is the Giants do have the luxury now of taking who they want at 5, and then whoever falls to 10, they can just go out and get, which is great. And that's
Exactly.
something we didn't know was going to be the case, right? Last week we
Yeah.
were going to land the top 10 pick there for Dexter Lawrence. So I think it's a great move for the Giants. I'm excited to see, what they do with those picks. In your mock, you have Sonny Styles falling to 8 to the Dallas Cowboys. What are your thoughts on Styles? Since there's a lot of people that could see him going 3 to 6 ish. Now I've seen him drop a little bit in some mocks as well. What are your thoughts on Styles, and what were your thoughts on him falling here 8 to Dallas?
I think when some people haven't fallen too, I think it's just the position exactly for some reason. And some people believe that he's strictly an off-ball type player. So that value, like earlier on in the draft, doesn't really make sense to select him. But the talent is definitely there. And that's why he's really good at, his exact skill set. So it'll be interesting to see who exactly makes that kind of move. I think Dallas needs just obviously a lot of help on defense. So that's a starting point. Would they be able to move up a little bit in the draft? I could see them doing that. to go to 6, I think that's a little too much for them. But I have them going to 8 with New Orleans, where New Orleans could trade down a few spots and still get a really good player as well. So that's why I think it wouldn't cost much for Dallas to move up 4 spots. So it wouldn't be the end of the world for them. And it wouldn't even hurt the Saints as much to move down a few spots where they get a good player as well.
Yeah, and they're adding another draft pick, right? I see in your mock here you have them adding a third round pick as well there for the Saints, and that's going to aid them in their rebuild. And they were competitive last year. The Saints weren't necessarily, a great team, but they were competitive. They made some strides in their rebuild, showed some promise. Tyler Shuck had some flashes as well. And I know they want to add to their defense, and you have them selecting Ruben Bain there at 12 with them falling there. So that would be a good value pick potentially, since Bain could ultimately go top 10, but he falls outside
Yeah.
and they get him there at 12. That'd be good value. And one guy I want to mention as well, you have Jeremiyah Love. We already mentioned him. You have him going 4 here to the Tennessee Titans. What are your thoughts on Jeremiyah Love? I know you're a big Notre Dame fan, so I'm sure you watch a lot of his film in college. What are your thoughts on Love and what he's going to do in the NFL?
I think overall he's like, from a talent standpoint, with his tree trunk type of legs and everything that he brings, he's the most, like, he's the top most talented prospect in the entire class. And if you're Tennessee, you're kind of looking for that next home run type hitter. I know you're in a rebuild. You're bringing in Rob Salas, your head coach, defensive minded guy, obviously, but they have a lot of talent on that defense already. You could add more there, of course. It doesn't hurt. But I think the explosiveness from Jeremiyah Love that he brings to the table, he would just be a home run type hitter for that offense. He could be used as a pass catcher too for them. And Cam Ward kind of needs that flexibility in his offense in year 2. So that would be really interesting to see how that could work out.
Yeah, that's a great point about noting Salah, obviously. So they could go defense with this, right? They can go in a lot of directions. And that's the beauty of mock drafts, right? Like no one ever
Yeah.
knows ultimately what's going to happen because there are smoke screens. There are teams you don't expect to trade up that end up trading up. You really never know what's going to happen. But I do see them being in contention there and thinking about taking him there at number 4. Love is a terrific player. I watched him play against BC here earlier this year, or I guess last year, later in the year. It was in November. November 1st, they played Notre Dame here at BC. And I watched him play in person. He had that home run hitting touchdown. I think it was like an 85, 90-yard touchdown. His ability just to find the gap and know where he can run and find the lane where he can go for 20, 30 yards is special. And not every player has that ability. And that's why in this draft, he probably is the only running back that's going to go in the first round. And we've had recent years, we've seen 2 or 3 running backs, 4 running backs go potentially, in conversation to go in the first round. And this year, it's really just him because he's really just that special. And there are some other good running backs. I know that kid from Notre Dame as well. Price, he's a good running back as well. But obviously, Love gets all of that hype because he is a very special player. And I'm excited to see where he goes. What are your thoughts on Price, though, as well? I know he's the guy that could go. I saw there was one mock like last week on NFL Network. I saw him going late first, but I see him probably going second or third in some other ones. What are your thoughts on him, Jadarian Price?
Yeah, so he's always been you'd think he's just a guy known behind Jeremiyah Love and everything. But his role too in Notre Dame's offense was pretty important too, because you really needed to space it out. You didn't want to overload Jeremiyah Love, but whenever Jadarian Price, his name was called, he answered that call for them. And whether it was on special teams too, he was a big value there for them too. And just his value, what he brings to the table, he would help out a team like Seattle. A team that needs a running back. They lost Kenneth Walker in free agency. Obviously, he went to Kansas City, so they need somebody that can make an impact for them. He's that type of guy. I think in the right system, right scheme, I think that would fit well for him in Seattle, and I think he would thrive just as a guy to be maybe with Charbonnet and another back as well. However, if they run a committee, most likely. But that would be an interesting fit for me for a Price in Seattle.
Yeah, I like him going to Seattle at 32 there in your mock. And I think, like I said, I've seen some flexibility where he's going. Like it's fluctuating. I've seen him go in the first. I've seen him go in the second. Not really third anymore. Maybe during the season, more so third round. But I've seen him going first or second. And that's the thing, right? You really never know what team's going to value a running back, right? But a team like the Seattle Seahawks who just won the Super Bowl, this is a luxury pick for them, right? Where they can just add whoever they want because they just won the Super Bowl, have a lot of talent coming back. Basically, most of that team is coming back besides Kenneth Walker and a couple other pieces. most of that team is returning next year. So they can just take best player available there, and he might be that best addition to their offense that could take them and keep them at that same level they had with Kenneth Walker. And I think that's a tough thing when you have Jeremiyah Love in front of you. That's going to take a lot of the shine away from you. But Price is a great
Exactly.
player. We saw him obviously have some big plays at Notre Dame. Really strong guy as well. And he's built obviously like a starting running back in the NFL. He looks like he's going to be a star running back just based on his build, his ability to get past that first line of defense, get to that next level. Also has some decent hands as well, right? So that
Yeah.
can help as well, at the next level. And without Kenneth Walker there, they're looking for that guy that could be their lead back. And like I said, he seems to fit that build for them. So excited to see where he goes in the draft. Another guy I want to mention is a guy you mentioned earlier in the episode, Caden McDonald out of Ohio State. Would you say is the best run stopping defensive lineman here in the draft?
Yeah, I believe so. And with his defensive coordinator, just the whole entire defensive unit, you think are going to be really impactful players in the NFL because of Matt Patricia being that defensive coordinator and obviously all those years that he had in New England. So his ability to make those college athletes into full-time pros at the college level, he's preparing those guys for the pros as we're speaking, like week in and week out and all these practices. So those guys have like an extra level of preparation and they're ready for like the big show. So that's why I would be always eyeing Ohio State's defense just because of their preparation and who they have as their defensive coordinator.
Mhm. Yeah, that's exactly the best way to put it, right? Look at the talent they have in the top 10, right? You got Caleb Downs, you got Sonny Styles, two guys that we go very high. On the offensive line, you got Connell Tate. They're gonna have probably 4 or 5 first round picks in this year's draft, which is miraculous considering you have 32 picks, and an eighth of it's going to be Ohio State guys, which is really impressive. I think it's a great point about Patricia. He does know how to establish talent, develop talent that's ready for the NFL. And you have him going Air McDonald 28th to Houston, adding him to a defensive line that already has a lot of talent, right? Will Anderson being one of the guys there that obviously is one of the best pass rushers in football. Just got a big time payday recently. 3 years, 150 million from Houston. Adding him to that D line would be special. I think it'd be a great fit there for him. I also would love to see him on the Giants if he somehow fell to the second round, but he's probably not. I probably see him going probably right around where you have him going, 28th. At worst, I would see him at 32, but I don't think he falls any chance to the second round. Would you agree? You think he's probably a lock for the first round, McDonald's?
Yeah, from what I was seeing, I think he pretty much is, but crazier things have happened. You know this firsthand. Players that are in the back end that first round, you just never know. There's teams in that back end that may just want to take a shot on somebody that they believe in, that they worked out with a lot of times, and they're like, okay, we actually believe in this guy, so we'll take the flyer in the back end of the first round on him. So like Houston, they need some offensive line help. Obviously, Stroud in the playoffs that didn't go well at all. But his progression is very important. So you invest in that offensive line too. But to add to already what's your major strength on that defense, that line, it wouldn't hurt because you just gave a major extension to Will Anderson. Why not invest a little bit more in that defense? You add another defensive tackle to that, and then with the rest of your draft picks, you address that offensive line. I think the offensive line you can kind of figure things out later on in the draft as well because I think there's some depth out there too that you can just plug and play some guys.
Yeah, and there's some projects, right? Guys that'll fall to day two that you can take a shot at, take a swing at, and they might end up being a project to start out, but can develop into a quality starter, which maybe Houston ends up looking to do that a little bit later in the draft. If they did, indeed go and get McDonald there at 28. Another team I want to mention is the Miami Dolphins. You have them taking Connell Tate at 11, addressing the wide receiver need, which we saw Tyreek Hill leave. Obviously, they released him recently, and then also traded Jalen Waddle. They traded Jalen Waddle to, if I remember correctly, it was Denver. So now you
Yes.
see them moving on from their two-star receivers, and obviously Hill was hurt most of last season. What are your thoughts on the Dolphins and them addressing wide receiver here in the draft?
They need a true number one alpha wide receiver immediately. And this is a team that's obviously in a full blown rebuild, new GM guy, I think that had ties with Green Bay. Now their head coach that they brought in, Jeff Hafley, guy from Green Bay, and Jeff Hafley, who used to be with Boston College. So, he's defensive minded guy. So they could go defense easily, try to build that up first. But I think they need somebody, a clear cut number one wide receiver that they're lacking. Carnell Tate could be that guy for them. I also thought, hey, it could make sense Makai Lemon for them too. but it also depends on who you have as that number one wide receiver in this draft, who you prefer. But like for a rebuild team like Miami, you need more of a Makai Lemon Cardinal, a guy that's proven and that can stay on the field. Tyson, great talent, but the question mark is whether or not he can stay on the field. So that's the big thing right there with him. So I think for a rebuilding team, that's a bit of a risk to kind of select Tyson, as much as it's a great talent, but that's a major risk there. But that's why I think Makai Lemon, Cornell Tate, that's a start to their wide receiver room.
Absolutely. That was excellent insight into where they currently stand as a team, right? They're in a rebuild. So maybe taking a guy like Tate to be that number one right away and help out, right? Now they got a new quarterback. Now you need a guy that, could step in and be that wide receiver one for them. They just, got the quarterback from Green Bay. It was the backup there. I don't know, I'm blanking on the name. They just picked him up in free agency. But they needed to make a move and go and add a receiver. And that's what they ended up doing, which is important here for them. And you look at some other teams, right? There are other teams that are in potential rebuilds, right? You look at the Cleveland Browns. You have them taking Tyson there at 9. What are your thoughts on them going grabbing a receiver there? Since we saw them last year trade down in the draft and obviously add in premium draft talent, giving up on the Travis Hunter potential of drafting him and trading down. Now you see them here with the 9th pick, also having another pick in the first round at 24. How do you think the Cleveland Browns attack the draft?
So I think this is a team that's interesting because they like to take a bunch of swings and they're willing to risk it. That's why I think if they trade down a few spots with Kansas City, just so then they can get a wide receiver, I think Kansas City may be looking to get that wide receiver, but they could also be getting a defensive player. Maybe they trade up. That's the reason why I have them with Cleveland in that scenario. But as for Cleveland, they're willing to just take a bunch of risk. And that's why I think Tyson kind of fits that kind of criteria for them, and the talent's there, just whether or not he can produce at the next level too and stay healthy on the field. So, I mean, I think he would fit well with Shador Sanders. I think Shador needs the proper development. Cleveland needs a lot on that offensive side. But that's why I think that's a start for them. And hopefully we just got to hope he stays on the field.
Yeah, the talent's definitely there. He checks a lot of boxes in that regard, and the athleticism as well, which Cleveland could definitely use. And you also have them taking Akeem Mesidor, an edge rusher out of Miami, with the 24th pick, adding to a defensive line that already has the best defensive player, I'd say, in the NFL, Myles Garrett. You're adding another guy there just to make that defensive line, even scarier and tougher to match up against. What were your thoughts on them taking him there at 24, Mesidor?
Mesidor was like, along with Ruben Bain, that was a pretty impressive run that they had in the college football playoffs to get all the way to the national championship game. So just seeing that duo on defense. So what Mesidor brings to the table, he's a really impactful pass rusher too for them. That's going to be coming off the edge. And I think that would just be a dynamic 1-2 punch with Garrett, and that'll just be a huge force. And why not? They need help in the secondary too, but I think Mesidor is more the more talented player. So we'll see what it comes down to at that spot by the time they select. But that's why I have them going with Mesidor at that spot over a defensive back.
Yeah, I like that pick for them, especially when you already have a great D line, like you said, and you already have a lot of talent. It's only going to make the matchup easier for the guy you're drafting when Myles Garrett's lining up next to you, right? So we'll see where they go with this in the draft. I think, like you said, there are a lot of interesting teams that could go in a lot of different directions, and that's what makes the draft so special. And I just remember the quarterback Malik Willis. That's a new quarterback in
Yes.
Miami. I was trying to remember. I was like, they signed a new quarterback. Was trying to remember. Obviously, two is now gone. He's in Atlanta. Now they got Malik Willis there on a new deal in free agency. So a lot of teams are going to look different. The Giants are going to have 2 top 10 picks added to this team. So it's going to be interesting on Thursday night to see how things end up. I want to ask you one more question about the draft. Ty Simpson, quarterback out of Alabama. There are a lot of questions of whether or not he's going to be a first-round pick, a second-round pick. No one really knows where he's going to fall in the draft. What are your thoughts on Simpson, and where do you think he ends up?
So if he were to get selected in the first round, I feel like the only team that really makes sense is probably Pittsburgh, just because if they had that uncertainty with Rodgers, we're playing the wait and see game with him. So who knows what's going to happen? And the fact that they're still kind of relying on that's really disappointing to me. If I'm a Steelers fan, I would be pissed off with that. It's like they deserve an answer by now. You should know if he wants to play one more year at least. But as of right now, it's going to be just Will Howard in that Pittsburgh quarterback room, really being QB1 for them. So I would be interested to see whether or not they would kind of wait or they select him in the first round. So, and another team, maybe Arizona, trading back up in the first round, or they wait till the second round for him. That's another team that I would watch out for him. But I don't see too many teams in the Ty Simpson market.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the one you said, the Steelers, is the best one. I think that ends up being the team. If he does go in the first round, it ends up being him. I saw some interest from the LA Rams at 1.2, which I mean the Rams right now are slated to pick at 13, so I don't expect them to take him there necessarily, but maybe they trade back into the second trade from the second round into the first, or trade up in the second round and get him at the early part of day two. Like you mentioned too, there could be a team that takes him in the back half. Maybe the Cardinals end up doing that. And then if you trade for him, if you take a guy 30, 31, 32, it's the same as if you're taking a guy in the top 10. You have that fifth-year option and you're paying them less money, obviously, at that 32nd pick slot value versus when you take a guy at 21, which that's where the Steelers are at 21. So we'll see where he ends up. I think he's an interesting player because in this draft, everyone knew number one, it was going to be Mendoza being the first quarterback taken, the number one pick. After that, there's questions about who's next. And obviously, probably Simpson ends up being that next guy that's selected. And I think he's a very good player. I do. It's just no one really knows where some of these quarterbacks are going to go because the last few years, it's been tough to predict. Shedeur Sanders was a projected top 5, top 10 pick, and then obviously fell to day 3 in the NFL draft. So you really never know where guys are going to end up. Are there any quarterbacks that you think are under the radar that you think could be potentially worth drafting for teams that are looking for a project? One guy, in my opinion, is Sawyer Robertson out of Baylor. I like the way he plays a lot. I think he's a guy that's underrated. I think he's probably going to go day 3 likely, so it won't be a lot of a risk for a team to take him. But that's a guy I think is underrated. Are there any quarterbacks that you would say are under the radar guys that you think could be end up being special as a potential project for a team in the draft?
I love that Sawyer Robinson pick for you from Baylor. He's really interesting to me. Also the guy from Arkansas, Green. Green.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by him. You know how it is in the NFL. It all depends on the right system, the scheme, and everything. You have to be willing and build and put in the time to develop quarterbacks. That's the thing. That's the problem. That's why it's such a rotating door in the NFL because people they get impatient to develop the quarterback and everything. So when you're drafting a quarterback, you have to understand the process, what it takes to actually put the time and effort into developing that guy. If you expect him to be that guy for you moving forward, you got to put that time and effort in.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And especially it depends on where you're drafted, right? A lot of time the scheme, the surrounding pieces, the offensive line, the coach, the offensive coordinator, like all of that does matter a lot, where you get drafted, especially if you're a guy that's going to be a day 3 pick like Sawyer Robinson. You're going to be just stepping in probably with limited expectations, but there is potential to grow and flourish if you're in the right system. That's the case with any player that gets drafted, right? You go to the right system, if you stay healthy, you can succeed. But obviously, not every player lives up to the hype and the potential, that they're supposed to in the NFL. It is a much different game, as we both know. So we'll see how things work out Thursday. I'm psyched for the draft, and I appreciate all of your insight into the NFL draft and everything you do on your Instagram. As I said, is amazing. All of the mock drafts you do and all the breakdowns. Keep doing all that great stuff, and I appreciate you being on here today. Talk the NFL draft. I want to switch over really quick and talk about the MLB. I know you're a big Yankees fan. You're going to the Mets game tonight, so you get to see Nolan McLean on the mound, which is awesome. He's been great for them this season. Probably one of the only bright spots on the Mets roster right now is McLean. What are your thoughts on the Mets? Would you say it's time to hit the panic button with them at 7-15 so far to begin the year?
I would say so because it seems like Mendoza has completely lost the group, and that's a problem for me. Like when the manager seems like they're starting to lose their touch inside the locker room a little bit. What's going on? You have your major player signings that you made, your Jorge Polanco, your Bo Bichette. They're not off to the exact start you would hope for. But like they bring a lot of versatility to the defense as well. So it's just like I understand those type of signs that they initially made, but they're not getting the results just yet. Your star player Francisco Lindor is barely batting above 200 right now, so he's off to a little bit of a slow start. But a star player of his caliber, you expect him to turn things around eventually. But the key thing for them is that you don't want to get too buried in that NL East right now because I know that Miami or the Phillies are right. They're only a game better than the Mets anyway as of now. But Miami's like a game or two under 500. Washington's a few games under. Atlanta's starting to kind of run away with it, but you don't want to get things too far apart early on in the year, because then when those head-to-head matchups happen, they become must-win games, and you can't afford must-win games in May or June already. That's kind of crazy that if you have to play must-win games that early in the year. So you don't want to dig yourself in too much of a hole. The Mets kind of need to start figuring things out. I'm really interested to see whether or not do they make a crucial move, like is Mendoza on his way out the door this early in the year? Can that be a possibility? I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a possibility. I think, like you said, you don't want to get too far in the basement of the division. And right now, they have the second worst record in baseball, the worst in the NL. So they are at rock bottom record wise. You would expect, and I think both of us can say that we would expect the Mets to get better. Like there is a lot of roster, there is a lot of talent on this roster, right? So you'd expect them to figure things out and turn things around. The major question is when, right? I know Juan
Yeah.
will be back at some point, so maybe that'll be the juice they need to this lineup. But time is ticking. I know it's early in the season. We're 22 games in. There's a lot of baseball left to be played, another 140 games. So they can figure things out. But you don't want to be sitting in the middle of May, 15 games under 500, right? Like they need
Yeah.
to figure things out soon. And in the event they don't, I do think Mendoza would be out the door. This is a team that I know they lost a lot of pieces in the offseason, but they made a lot of good moves. When you look at this team on paper, they're a lot better than 7-15. I thought they would be a World Series contender this year with the moves they made. I liked the Luis Robert Jr. addition. I actually really liked the addition of Bo Bichette. I know he got paid pretty heavily. I know it was a short-term deal, but I liked that addition a lot. Jorge Polanco was one of the best players in the playoffs this past year. You added him in free agency. You obviously add as well Marcus Semien, who is probably in the back end of his career, past his prime, but still can give you a couple quality at bats here and there, and is a starter on this team. You have Francisco Lindor, you get Juan Soto, you got Kodai Senga. Like there is a lot of talent on this roster. You trade for Freddie Peralta. This team should not be 7-15. So in the event it does continue to get worse, I do think Mendoza would be on his way out. It seems like they're giving him a little bit of a leash, which I get, right? You want to give him a little bit of time to figure things out and get on track. But I don't think too much time is the solution here. This team can't be 15 games under in a month from now. What are your thoughts on when it would be the timing for them to say, you know what, we got to move on from Mendoza?
One of the biggest questions for me right now is I don't know much about Mendoza in terms of leadership and everything. So I'm just curious to see, like, during this 11-game losing streak, who is leading the way? Who's motivating these guys to kind of get out of it and get out of our funk, start playing the baseball that we know that we're capable of playing at a consistent basis? That's the major question for me, is who is leading that locker room? Is it Lindor? Is it Soto? Is it Mendoza? I'm not too sure. So that's the biggest question mark for me, because if they are not feeling motivated, this season is over within the next few weeks already. And then they'll be looking for another manager if that's the case. But you know, it's tough to say, because if they don't get out of this funk soon, you probably assume that they're going to be looking for other options and looking for a different voice. And you wouldn't blame them if they continue on a horrible streak like this. So we'll see where things go.
Yeah, 11 losses in a row, like you mentioned. Like that's horrible, obviously, and that's their worst losing streak since 2004. So 2 decades now of a streak. They've obviously reached now with 11 losses in a row. And it seems like you said, they might not have that leader in the clubhouse. You lose Pete Alonso, you lose McNeil, you lose Nimmo, guys that have been there for years through ups and downs, some good seasons, some bad seasons, some good moments, some bad moments. Now you lose those guys. They don't really have maybe a guy that can steer the ship right now, and they need that. And I think some of that blame will go on the head coach. It goes in the players as well, right? There's a lot of guys that are struggling. Like you said, Lindor's just over 200 at 205 for batting average with just one RBI on the season, 600 OPS. You got Bichette, who's hitting 217. You got Lindor, who only has, like I said, a 205 batting average. Soto's only played in 8 games this year with an injury, 355 batting average. So he has been good in those 8 games, but has been limited now, being out the last couple weeks. So they do need somebody that can right the ship and figure things out. And I am a Red Sox fan first, but I do love when New York sports, the Mets, the Yankees, when they're doing well, the Giants, the Knicks, it doesn't matter what New York sports team, sports are better when New York teams are doing well. And that's the reality of the situation is, and I do like this Mets team as well. I visited Citi Field actually earlier in the year. Really beautiful stadium. I want this Mets team to figure things out. And I know you're a Yankees fan, so there is the rivalry there with the Mets. But at the same time, it would make things interesting when the Subway Series comes around, when both teams are hopefully
Exactly.
playing better ball, right? And now that brings me to the Yankees. How do you think they measure up to the rest of the AL, and how have you felt about the way they've played so far this season?
So I think right now it's between them and Toronto in the AL East because you can never count out a team that was just in the World Series last year and a team that actually beat you in the postseason. So Toronto, even though they're off what they're 5 games under 500 right now, they'll get out of that funk. They have way too much talent on the staff and their offense to not get out of the funk. So you expect Toronto to be in the mix throughout the entire year with them. You also, Tampa Bay is always lingering. So like the Rays, they swept the Yankees already at Tropicana this season. But the Rays like to float around that 500 mark. They always like to be a thorn in your side as well, so you can't rule them out. I'm interested to see what's going on with Boston. I'm waiting for Boston to be like, come on, let's go. I'm waiting for Jaron Duran. I'm waiting for that part too as well offensively. So the AL East, right now I'm not really too sure about who's coming out of the division, but Ben Rice, Ben Rice has been a really interesting player for the Yankees offensively. They're finally letting him become his own and play him. You got to play this kid every single day. He's an impactful left-handed hitter. For that short push over in right field, you got to have him in the lineup every day. He gives you the best chance to win. Having him in the lineup, he has to be in there. That's a no-brainer decision. You can't really mix and match. I know Aaron Boone, analytics and everything. Yankees are driven with that. But, you can't really mix and match when it comes to an overall talent like that. And Ben Rice produces for you.
Yeah, he's been awesome. 8 home runs to begin the year. He's hitting 338. And I think one interesting thing, I was looking at some of his stats today, 21.4% walk rate, 97th percentile in the MLB. He's been very patient this year at the plate. He still swings and misses a little bit, but that's fine. That's going to happen when you're swinging for the fences like he does. The chase rate's only at 21%. That's 88th percentile in baseball. Like, he's been very disciplined at the plate this year, and obviously the stats are showing that. He's got a 1276 OPS, 18 RBIs, 21 strikeouts to 18 walks. Aaron Judge putting together, I know not the best batting average season just yet, but home runs wise, already has 9 home runs. In a blink every year, he's going to be right there for the MVP vote in the AL. He's a terrific player, and I expect his batting average to get up from 232. He'll figure things out at some point and get back up to 300. Jazz Chisholm's a guy I want to ask you about because I know he's struggled a little bit so far to begin the season. 164 batting average, 26 strikeouts to 9 walks, just 3 RBIs, no home runs. Does have 8 stolen bases, so he's bringing some speed, an element to that Yankees lineup they could use. 8 stolen bases in 9 attempts. But what are your thoughts on Jazz and his struggles to begin the year?
I'm not too worried about his struggles early on because a player like Jazz, his flashiness that he brings on the defensive side and the way he runs the bases and everything, he kind of is that energizer type guy. He always stays positive. He's always motivated. That's what I love about him. So a guy like that, I'm not hitting the panic button on with his struggles offensively. It's kind of, for me, it's just like, okay, let's look through up and down the rest of this lineup. Who's the next guy that can step up? They re-signed Trent Grisham to a 1-year deal. Okay, I need more from him. It's a collective effort. Austin Wells starting to come around a little bit hitting wise. You need him to start hitting too. It's a collective effort. You need staying on a consistent basis. You need him to stay healthy. Whoever is the shortstop every day, is it going to be Caballero? Is it going to be Volpe moving forward when he comes back? That's a question mark. Third base, McMahon. McMahon's struggling too hitting. He's known for defense and everything, but we need a little bit more from him too. So I think it's more of a collective effort for them. And that's why I had a little bit of a problem with them running it back completely just because of that reason. It's just guys that you have some that are hit or miss. So I'm curious to see if there's a trade or something that they can make across the year, whether or not they get another impactful bat or not. But that's the one thing I think Cashman's been hesitating on, is giving up quality talent.
Yeah, it's tough, especially with where the Yankees stand. And like you said, there were question marks on this roster. I think every team has question marks. And that's why
Right.
originally my predictions, I actually had the Yankees missing the playoffs. I had them right on the board, I think, by a game missing because I worried about some of their injuries. Obviously, Stan's had his injuries over the years and had some troubles in the offseason, but obviously now he's playing. Garrett Cole was coming back, obviously, mid-season. There was a question mark about what you can expect from him, but there's not going to be too much pressure on him. And you obviously have Max Fried, Kim Schlittler putting up really good numbers, Luis Hale. Like, there's not going to be too much pressure on Garrett Cole, which is great because a lot of the time when you add an ace to your lineup, you expect him to be an ace right away, and you need that production a lot of the time. With this Yankees team, they might not need 7 innings out of Cole. They're going to be probably taking it very easy. Give him 3, 4 innings for the first month or so of while he's pitching in MLB games, and he does get back. And that's the good thing with this team is they're playing good ball right now. Right now, where you stand, right, you're the top of the AL East, which is great. And this is a division where when you're 13-9 right now, and you have 2 or 3 teams, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, who are under 500, and you're still playing decent ball with guys coming back at some point, Garrett Cole being included, Anthony Volpe as well. The Yankees aren't in a bad spot at all, and I'm actually going to the game tonight, so we'll see how
Oh,
they do
nice.
against the Sox tonight. I'm excited to be there at Fenway, but this Yankees team has impressed me to begin the year, and I think mainly Ben Rice has been the guy that I had one of my friends and my cousin on my podcast, Finn Kelly. He was on before the MLB season, and his breakout guy in baseball this year was Ben Rice. That was his prediction.
Wow.
And we see him obviously putting up big time numbers now with 8 home runs. What are your thoughts on? I know you said analytics have been kind of an issue there with the Yankees deciding to hold him out of the lineup at times. What are your thoughts on them platooning him at some points against left-handed pitching? But now it seems like they ripped the Band-Aid off and he's going to be in the lineup each and every day, or at least that's the hope.
Yeah, so when you determine that he's like an X factor for your offense and he's able to produce at a high level, it's a no-brainer decision. You just throw that right out the window, the mix and match and stuff. And that's it gives you the best chance to win. Like when I'm looking at even the Yankees' top prospect right now, hitting wise, George Lombard Jr. He's producing, he's raking right now down in Double A Somerset. So that's the case. If he gives you the best opportunity to win, you kind of, I know maybe you're hesitant because you don't want to rush the kid's development, stuff like that. But if you call him up, he makes the impact on winning. So, you can't really get over that fact. You have to kind of put up the most major league roster that you can. That's the biggest thing for me. And even the bullpen, too. They have 2 elite arms in the farm system. I think that can be either stretched out as stars or long man relievers. They have Rodriguez Cruz. They have Carlos Legrand. Hey, I think those guys that the Yankees need help in that bullpen right now a bit. And those 2 guys make a lot of sense, too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not a bad place to be. You have guys that will be up at some point. And in the event you need a chess piece move at the deadline, throw a guy in a trade, you got some prospects that can go and, net you a good return. And we've seen the Yankees be aggressive in the past with their prospects, going out and getting Juan Soto at one point a few years ago. So they haven't necessarily, always shied away from trading the prospects, but I do know what you mean. They have at times as well where they've been, we want to hold on to our guys. And we'll see what they do. Obviously a team that's 13-9, top of the AL East. You don't need to do too much right now. I think it's more of a worry for the Red Sox, a team that had high expectations and they just haven't been showing up, especially offensively. They don't have the power they were supposed to. And there was no big time bat in the lineup that was going to give you 35 home runs before the year began. But we expected more from Roman Anthony. You expect more from Jarren Duran. You expect more from Cedar Rafaela as well, which he's actually had a decent season to begin the year. But Anthony has struggled. Duran has struggled. Caleb Durbin, contact-wise, he was supposed to be a guy that's going to put the ball in play with guys in scoring position. Hasn't done that yet. So the Red Sox are in a little bit more of a position where there's a sense of urgency. The Yankees are in a fine spot with where they're at. We'll see, what happens for the Sox. Do you think, which I'm a Red Sox fan, so I know as a Yankees fan, you're probably happy to see them struggling, but do you think it's time for the Red Sox to somewhat be panicked about the way things have gone so far to begin the year?
Not as much because the guys that you invested into, you brought in this off season. I think that they will click at some point. I think some guys just got to get used to their roles and everything like that. But would it hurt if there's an opportunity to add somebody to that mix? It wouldn't hurt, of course not. If it doesn't hurt your farm system and guys that can make impacts for you in a little bit. But Duran, Rafaela, guys like that, those guys put the ball in play. Especially Duran, I keep looking at him just because of the speed that he brings on the bases. He's a major factor. As soon as he touches first base, it's a problem because your all eyes are on him, all eyes are on Rafaela as soon as he's on first base. So it's just like once you bring that unique part back to the Boston Red Sox and they're able to find that guy in the lineup and then they get those guys on base, I think things will start to roll for them a little bit.
Yeah, I hope so. And we'll see how things go. It's a long season ahead. I got one more question for you about the Yankees and then one about the Knicks. The Yankees, Cam Schlittler being a local guy, just like Ben Rice, both guys from Massachusetts, being very good players there for the Yankees. So it's tough for the Red Sox to let those guys go and, be on the Yankees, but both have been great. What are your thoughts on Cam Schlittler? Is he the next, ace for the Yankees of the future, which he's put up a great last season and change, right, for the Yankees since he was called up last year. He's been awesome. What are your thoughts on Schlittler?
I think he's answered all the questions that you could even think of just because of the way he came out and pitched for you in the postseason. Just have the way he was able to step up and just like it seemed like it didn't really phase him, the environment and stuff like that. And he was kind of built for that moment. You know that you got a real pitcher here for the long haul. And I think that's the most important thing. And they found that out in the postseason. So I think he's going to be a really great talent for them moving forward for the future. Now I see why they never wanted to mention him in any sort of trade. So that kind of is like that goes to the Yankees advanced scouting department and everything, telling Cashman, make sure you're not trading this guy because that's a huge kudos to him on that one. Because usually Yankees sometimes they're known for if the high pressure situation, they need that major arm or they need a major bat, they may go in and say like, okay, this is what the fan base wants. They want us to go all in. We'll trade them. And now this is who we're gonna have to give up. So that's the thing. So I'm glad the Yankees never really entertained trading Schlittler at any point.
Yeah, and he's been great. He's developed well in their farm system. He's a guy I saw play a lot at Northeastern University is where he played his college ball. So I saw him pitch probably a dozen times in his college career, and he was sitting 94, 95 with a fastball, but to get up to 100 and now be throwing it with accuracy as well, like it's special. So he's potentially that ace of the future for the Yankees. I know he's still young and has some time, obviously, and still would develop even more probably the next few seasons, but he's been awesome to watch, and I'm happy to see him succeed in there in New York. I do want to ask you about the Knicks. Tied 1-1 in the series with the Atlanta Hawks. Do you think the Knicks should be worried now heading back to Atlanta with the series being 1-1?
I think not really as much worried, but both teams, they've been playing pretty tight games for the most part. There's been a lot of physicality, obviously, and that's what you kind of expected. These two teams, obviously, the last time they met in the postseason, Trae Young was that villain role and everything. So obviously they don't have Trae Young anymore. He's over in Washington now. But that's kind of you still have that level of physicality. So I'm really interested to see how long the series can really go. But I wouldn't be worried just because the Knicks offensively, they're always gonna put up the points. I'm never really concerned about them there, but it's the transition defense on the other end. It's just a lack of that. That's the one thing. Like if they get a little, lackadaisy.
But absolutely, you're right. The transition defense has been a problem there at times, which I think the Knicks too. They played a little bit, like you said, lackadaisically, in some moments, and obviously in crunch time yesterday, probably wasn't the best look getting the ball to Mikal Bridges. I think obviously Jalen Brunson probably would have been their ideal pick there to be the guy getting that shot in that big moment. They could have used a timeout. They didn't. It is what it is. I think it's going to be a good, long series. We'll see how things go, but I wouldn't necessarily panic. I do think this Hawks team though is very talented. They have no superstar. Like you said, they don't have Trae Young anymore being that closer for them. They just have a lot of guys that play team basketball, which obviously helps, especially in the playoffs. We'll see what they look like, when push comes to shove now with the season going back, series going back to Atlanta. But I think you make a great point, though, about that Knicks team. Obviously, being a team that has a lot of talent offensively, they're going to put things together at some point. And we saw them last year against the Celtics match up very well with the Boston Celtics. What are your thoughts on potentially the Celtics matching up with them again in the second round? Should both teams win their respective series right now?
Now that's a matchup that would worry me. Is going up against Boston. I know obviously the Knicks had them last season, but now this time, Jason Tatum coming fully healthy and back, and he's been fully effective in his way of playing. So that's gonna in a revenge type series. That'll be difficult for me for the Knicks. I'll be very worried for that matchup. I wouldn't be looking forward to it. They have a couple of players too. I also Derek White. They have guys that just all around are really good rotational pieces too, and that kind of concerns me for a matchup in a best of seven series and a rematch.
Yeah, but what the nice thing is with this personnel that the Knicks have is you have that ability to match up with Tatum, Brown, White. I know Tatum got hurt last year, but you were already leading in that series at that point. This year's team obviously is a little different. Now you got a new head coach, a little bit different style of basketball, right? You use the bench a little bit more than you did probably in the past.
Yeah.
Maybe the playoffs might be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, you have the same personnel for the most part to beat the Celtics last year. So I think that would be an interesting second round series should both teams match up. It seems like, and I did like Atlanta a lot, and I still think they match up well with the Knicks. But if you beat the Hawks and then you're going on and facing the Celtics, you just beat a very good team in Atlanta, should you get past them, right? So there will be some momentum heading into that series against Boston. I know Boston has more talent than the Hawks do, but if you get past them, there is momentum, things you can carry from that series into Boston. So we'll see. I'm excited to see how the NBA playoffs shake out. But anyway, Shawn, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Thank you so much, my friend, for having you on the podcast today, for taking the time to bring in all the insight, especially the NFL draft. You know the draft so well. You're a great insider with all of that and all of sports. To have you on today was a privilege and an honor. Thank you so much for your time. I'm wishing the Yankees the best for the rest of the season, and hopefully you have a great time at the Mets tonight. Thank you, Shawn.
Hey, thank you, Joey, for having me on. Enjoy the game in Boston tonight. That's going to be an interesting series.
We'll see how it goes. Best of luck to the Yankees, my friend. Take care.
You too.
All right. Perfect.